Wow. So thanks so much. I'm sorry that I'm not WeiWei, and I know that that's why all of you are here. And so thank you to everyone that's staying, even though he's not going to come. I had the recent pleasure of being able to participate in an event put on by Rhizome, which is part of the New Museum in New York City. And they have an event called 7 on 7, and the idea is to pair up 7 technologists with 7 artists. And I think this is a pretty interesting frame for creating some art. And in this case, since it takes place in the United States, I was a little hesitant to accept for a number of reasons, and one of which is that in about a week it will be the 2-year anniversary of me being in basically exile in Europe. I have not gone back to the United States, precisely because of the WikiLeaks grand jury. And it is the case that the US government's political oppression of myself and other people involved in WikiLeaks has created constraints, let's say. And those conditions of constraints meant that going to New York City was really not an option, and the people from Rhizome understood this. So rather what they did is they said, well, you know, we'd like to pair you up with someone that has some constraints too. In this case, he's a Chinese artist. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting, you know, tell me more about him. And they said, well, he doesn't have a passport, he can't leave China. And I said, okay, sounds interesting. And his name is WeiWei. And I said, okay, sounds interesting. I don't know a lot about this person. And it turns out WeiWei, for those of you that don't know, is a little bit like the Andy Warhol of China, but really is one of the great living artists. And, you know, I'm not a particularly cultured person, I guess, so I missed that. So I accepted the invitation without realizing what an incredible experience it would be, with thinking it would just be, I'm gonna meet some guy in China and we're gonna make some art together, whatever that looks like. And I really don't like the frame of technology versus artist. I think that's a really strange thing, or the pairing up. And so I had some ideas which were actually not about the internet as we think of the internet, but about the internet in terms of how we think of relationships and human beings. So I didn't want to make some, sorry for all the people in the audience with startups, I didn't want to make a startup art piece. I didn't want to make a thing that was meant to be a startup, or there was some sort of flashy website. I don't even really like the World Wide Web. The internet is more than the World Wide Web. And the internet, in my view, is a great expression of humans connecting with each other. And that happens with TCP/IP, but it actually also happens without TCP/IP. It happens, hopefully, in some really great ways without having the internet involved in the traditional sense at all. And I think that's Sarah. Is that you? I can't. Is it? Oh, thank God. Oh, I had a heart attack there. I was wondering when she was going to show up. So this art project was really strange because for the first few days we were locked in WeiWei's compound, basically, and spending time with him. We got to see him in his hotel where he was staying, and it started to dawn on me that I actually had no idea what I was doing in China. I had no idea who this artist was, and so we just sort of talked. And we met, and we spoke, and we started to talk about our experience with state oppression in particular. And it turns out we've had like some common experiences, and it was really very difficult. And to make matters stranger, Laura Poitras came. And she's a director, some of you know from the film Citizen 4, and she is really amazing. And I think maybe, but I'm not sure, that WeiWei was very fond of her from the get-go, let's say. And so we had a really strange dynamic, the 3 of us there in Beijing. It was very good, and Laura started to film, and she started to spend some time basically just sort of doing the thing that Laura does, which is documenting where everyone feels very comfortable. And we talked, and WeiWei challenged her. She was especially challenged by WeiWei with regard to redactions of the Snowden documents, and that put the 3 of us in a really interesting debate. WeiWei actually filmed most of that, which I thought was really interesting. It was really a turnaround moment for, I've spent 5 years working with Laura, and never really has anyone ever turned a camera on Laura in that 5 years, and WeiWei did that. And he documents absolutely everything. So we were going to the gym in the morning to work out, because I think it's really important, like for mental fitness, you need physical fitness. And WeiWei agrees, but WeiWei also live streams going to the gym. And so he filmed me doing push-ups in the gym when I was very tired. So the 500,000 people that read his Instagram feed gave commentary on how I need to keep my chin up when I do push-ups. And so that was the setup for going to his compound and working. And what I want to show, and I think we're going to show right now, is a film that Laura made about this, commissioned by 7x7, Rhizome, and the new museum. And so I would appreciate it if no one leaks it, but I know how this works. So it's mostly just that we hope that we can get it out to a wider audience, but you know, if it leaks, that's how it goes. And we are Entropy after all. So this is a film by Laura, and this is the first time it's being seen widely in public. There was one previous version of this film which was shown at the actual opening, the Rhizome opening. So without further ado, there's a 12-minute video, and I'm just going to sit back and watch it with you. Did she put the microphone on you too?
No.
She didn't bug you?
No.
She must have bugged you.
She did? How she did?
Right there.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know it. So that means like whatever I say, she will record it, right?
She's a surveillance machine.
That's very dangerous.
She's a surveillance machine.
Oh. Okay. Gotta be careful. What does no for mean?
Oh, whoops. I handed that to you, didn't I?
Yeah, top secret.
It means no foreigners. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I shouldn't have handed that to you. I should have shredded it myself.
Foreigners. Who's foreigners? That means what does no foreigners mean?
It means if you're not an American citizen, you don't have any right to read it. And if you're an American citizen, you only have a right to read it if the government has approved you.
No foreign.
Yeah, exactly. It's not for you. And it's not for me because I'm not cleared. This is a very important one. This is the Presidential Policy Directive 20. Talks about the budgets, a breakdown of the CIA budgeting, and in this case about cryptologic programs. This is talking about their programs to monitor the things you do on
Twitter.
Corporate services like Twitter.
So to what?
This one's a good one, and it explains that they use this for propaganda, deception, mass messaging, pushing stories, alias development, and for psychological manipulation.
Who's doing that?
This is the British government. They call it full spectrum cyber effects.
So
It's from the head of JTRIG and from SD effects lead.
so it's program for whom to use?
It's to use on you and to use on me.
Yeah, but who's going to use it?
These people use it to disrupt us.
Agencies.
Yeah. So you know when you were attacked on Twitter?
That's right, because in China they have this. So I thought only Chinese have this, but
No, this
take that one, that page.
this page.
That's interesting. Because we always think, we call it a 50 cent army.
Yeah.
So
Here's one where the journalists involved either didn't understand the technology, or they did and they decided to help censor. That whole black box has information that would show what they understood to be configuration information about someone that they're attacking. So this is kind of war journalism of the 21st century, and someone's got a picture of the battlefield and they've blacked out all of the things on the battlefield. Oh hey, you like iPhones? Well, look at that.
what is that?
This is about them actually targeting, specific targeting of mobile phones, such as the iPhone.
hat. Special Panda.
It's a panda suit.
Can't believe the one Panda will take so much stuff in there. Not the whole box. Oh, look. That's from one Panda.
We're going to have a few.
So I want you to close your eyes.
My eyes. You don't touch me while I close my eyes, okay?
No. Just think about the worst experience you had with the state.
You want me to talk?
I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
So now describe the space.
The room. If I talk about the room I have been in, that there's a bed, there's a toilet, a shower, and there's a table for questioning, and one chair with armchair, so I can sit in. Also, I was handcuffed sometimes with the armchair. And there's always two soldiers, military type, with uniforms, standing 80 centimeters away in front of me, 24 hours a day. So in the room, the light is never off. They're always standing 80 centimeters away from me. They cannot talk, but they can always look at me and emotionless. Yeah, basically that's the condition.
你怎么真的变成嘟嘟脸了呀？早晨
每次早晨都是这样，
是吧？
然后一到中午、下午的
就又变瘦回去了。
对，每次早晨都是这样。
你这样越来越像我了。嗯哼。
And then we just put the chip
这么小
inside.
的都开价？
不是，刚才他拿的那个，就把它插在那上面，就插在电脑
你
上。
们连这个都没卖的啊？
没货现在。
对 ，U 盘在哪儿？
Try to distribute them to as many different places as we can, so it's like a distributed backup. We keep one here and we send one to different places. It makes it impossible to destroy the information without destroying all 20 of them. And one of the safest places to put these things is in a museum or in a gallery where it's, as an object, it's protected.
Send to them like what? Like give to them or what?
I don't know.
来做咱们时间少。
Can I have a disc?
So
Close your eyes.
You get off the airplane and you walk down the jetway. In my case, there were people waiting at the jetway. They didn't take me then, but I walked to the customs line, and at the customs desk, they flagged me and turned on their little yellow light and then took me away downstairs, down an escalator, and then past a mirrored kind of observation post. At one point, the mirrored room, the door opened and you could hear just like conversation. And right before the door closed, someone said, "So that's what a terrorist looks like these days?" Then I was taken into another room and they
kind of took off some of my clothes, but not all of them, and pushed me up against the wall. And one officer grabbed my wrists and held me against the wall, where another one stuck his fingers dangerously close to being inside of me. And then they put me in an interrogation room. And they took turns asking me lots of questions about WikiLeaks and about Julian. And at some point, someone walked into the room. He was clearly the guy that worked with computers. I said, give us the password to your computer, to your hard drive. And I said, well, yeah, I don't have one. They're like, give us the password to your hard drive. And I said, no, you don't understand. I don't have a hard drive in my computer. And they said, well, what do you mean you don't have a hard drive in your computer? And I said, well, the thing about being really good with the computers is that once you get really good with computers, you don't need one anymore.
And we have a winner. WeiWei and I wanted to thank Sarah Harrison with one of the pandas for saving Edward Snowden's life. Thanks for coming. Naturally, I think that it's clear that without this person right here, we wouldn't be having these discussions, and this art piece would not exist. And if it was not for Sarah Harrison, if it was not for Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, and Edward Snowden, I think our world would be a much different place. And so WeiWei and I discussed that we thought it was important. So we made 20 of these pandas, and we sent them to a number of people using human networks. Because resistance does not have to come just from the internet. Resistance comes from our hearts. And we can use our brains to do amazing things if we apply ourselves. And we wanted to make sure that we would be able to share. So we called this project P2P, or Panda to Panda. And I should explain something which is a little contradictory in nature, which is that in China, Panda is what you call a secret agent. It's what you call an undercover cop. He's a panda, they would say. So, Panda to Panda is our attempt not only to thank people who helped make this conversation possible, but also to make it impossible for people to stop us from having this conversation. Thank you very much.
We only have a couple of minutes, so let me see. I can have 1 or 2 questions for Jacob. Anybody up front here who's got a question for Jacob? Totally overwhelmed.
There's a question in the back.
There's a question in the back. I'll try to make my way there. Hold on. Why don't people ask?
First, thanks for the video. I thought it was really interesting. I'm currently based in Beijing as a journalist, and if you look at kind of the bubble of, this is super irritating. If you look at the bubble of people who look at China, there was a lot of criticism after you had left, and a lot of people were wondering if you had, WeiWei had talked at all about how the Snowden revelations, to a certain extent, gave more legitimacy to Chinese surveillance, and the Chinese state was kind of turning this around, and a lot of people were saying, look at how terrible the states are, they may be even worse than China, and suddenly China was being, or this Chinese state seemed to be in a position where they actually looked much better than before the Snowden revelations. That may be true in relative terms, but not necessarily in absolute terms, because the situation in China hasn't really changed. So I would be interested in what you think about this, and if you two talked about this at all.
Sure. Of course, WeiWei and I did talk a great deal about this. On one of the days while we were working, the first day we were in his studio working, the police requested a lunch with him. And if you've ever had a police officer request a lunch with you, you know that usually saying no is not an option. It's not a request. So WeiWei went, and he was really visibly shaken after this. I mean, it was a 2-hour lunch. We continued to work while he was away, and it was obvious that it fucked him up. I mean, my particular experience with this was seeing a person who was in a similar position to actually things I've seen Laura go through after she went through a particularly brutal interrogation. Things that I myself have experienced, where I was definitely asked things that I wish that I hadn't been asked. And we really connected about it. Actually, after this happened, we talked about authoritarianism in China, and particularly in networked authoritarianism. I told him my view about the Tibetan genocide, for example. And it's quite clear that China is an authoritarian state. And it's also quite clear that some of the scariest things about China are the things that you don't see. So for example, I said online that it doesn't feel like an oppressive place. And this is an important distinction. There's a lot of demonization of China where people imagine it to be like a Maoist story, where there is a policeman with a truncheon who's going to hit you every 5 minutes. And that's the case for some people in China. But the majority of the people in China do not have that direct experience. Instead, they experience an invisible authoritarianism, networked authoritarianism, where all of the things that they do are part of the Golden Shield project, where all of the things they do online are going into analytics systems, not so differently from other analytics systems. In fact, Cisco even gave a presentation in which they tried to sell the Chinese government this kind of networking equipment specifically to track down religious minority groups, right? And those religious minority groups tried to sue in the United States about it. So the authoritarianism of the Chinese state is electronic and invisible for many people. So for example, there's surveillance cameras completely surrounding WeiWei's compound, which he hung lanterns on. My general inclination with surveillance cameras is to play a game of cam over. For those of you that don't know, it's where you smash the cameras and then upload videos anonymously to YouTube to collect points. Don't forget to use Tor. And in China, his view was that you shouldn't provoke. So he put instead just lanterns to signify that the cameras were there. And I think it's very clear, for example, that a country that has mobile death vans, that there's something deeply wrong about that culture. And what WeiWei was facing is also deeply wrong. And for example, WeiWei does not have a passport. And he is held in a perpetual state of terror. This is my observation. It's not what he said. He was very discreet about the things that he said. And he resorts to self-censorship, like many people do, actually. And that self-censorship is very overwhelming and very powerful. And it causes him to have a veil. I mean, I don't know him, obviously, but he has a veil. And you can see the veil. And after the interrogation, the veil was lifted up. For a brief period of time, you could see just the raw humanity that was pulled out by this experience of them explaining how embarrassed they were, that he didn't have a passport. And he's obviously a good guy, and he doesn't mean to cause trouble, and it just doesn't make any sense to them why he doesn't have his passport back, and they're going to work on getting his passport back. So they have this carrot, and of course the authoritarianist stick is everywhere. And of course we didn't miss that. The hotel did not have crypto on the cell phone networks. It's very obvious the surveillance is happening. It's also clear that if you come as a person of privilege from the West with, say, a telecom SIM card and a phone to China, you bypass most of the censorship because the connection is tunneled back to Germany. So it's an effective circumvention technique. I use that technique specifically because I wanted to see if it would work at all. There are many other connections. The hotel connection had a different kind of filtering. And again, this is another conception, which is there's this great wall around China and it's impenetrable. But actually it's not. It is the case that this wall that exists there is actually a series of little walls, little webs, little bureaucratic cracks, actually. And people get caught up in them. And so it's very obvious to me that there are some deeply, fundamentally unsettling things. But it's also clear that it requires exploration, and it requires people actually traveling there. And a lot of the people that are concerned about China, some of them are actually just fucking racists. And I think it's important to call that out. There's a lot to criticize about China, but we should not give in to some of the petty racists that are simply scaremongering, xenophobe people. And there are a lot of those people around the world.
Jacob Appelbaum, thank you very much for sharing your project. Thank you for having three great minds come together. Thank you all. We have another talk coming up in a minute. It's about the Makers Fair in Berlin, something totally different, but stick around and learn more about the Makers Fair in Berlin in a minute. Thank you very much.